So today, we'll be going over every deck in Code Geass Volume 2 for Union Arena. So the goal of this pack is to boost up all the decks from Volume 1 and also to introduce a new color, which is blue, to the Code Geass IP for Union Arena. So the first deck that we'll be looking at is the purple Code Geass deck. So this will be a revamped version of what is known as one of the strongest decks from the IP. So here's the full deck list. So the first card that we'll be looking at is Lelouch Lamperouge. This is the new 5-cost 2 action point Lelouch, who can be the new color trigger of this deck with 4000 BP. So this card reads, this character cannot be blocked by a character with 4500 or more BP. Also when played, choose one of the following. You may place one card with 2 AP costs from your hand into your sideline. If you do, choose 2 instead. So you can choose up to one character on your opponent's front line. It loses 3000 BP until the end of the turn, or switch this character to active, or choose up to one of your AP cards and switch it to active. So definitely this is a very versatile card that allows its effect to be modular based on the situation that you are in. So if there are no cards on your opponent's field, you can use this card to be more aggressive, to deal more damage, and to switch an AP active. Or if there's an opposing card, you can play a bit more defensive depending on the situation that you're in. So our next card is the 3-cost 2 action point Kallen, which reads, when played, draw a card, definitely good. Reduce the AP cost of the next card with 2 AP costs you use from your hand this turn by 1. So what does this mean specifically? It means that it only applies to the next 2 AP cost card that you play. So for example, if the next card you play only costs 1 AP, you don't lose the effect of Kallen. You can play the 4-cost 2 action point special, Power of Absolute Obedience, allowing you to sideline an opposing card, since this would only cost 1 AP, and it would cost 0 AP given that you've already played the Kallen beforehand. And then you would have fulfilled the requirements of your 2-cost CC, allowing you to draw 2 cards. Card that is new is the 3-cost Gurren Flight Enabled version, 1 action point. So this is a card that we will not be playing in the deck, and we'll be explaining why, but the effect is raid. This character cannot be blocked by a character with 4000 or more BP. It also says when played, draw a card, then place one card from your hand into your sideline with 3500 BP, and it has a get trigger. So the main reason why we are not playing this card is mainly because this deck already has a lot of Gurrens. For example, the 5-cost Gurren and the other 5-cost Gurren. So basically, if you're trying to play too many Gurrens, you won't have enough Kallens as raid targets, so you will be effectively starved for raid targets. The 3-cost Gurren is definitely a faster card to play at 3 energy. But it's not that good in the early game because most of the time your opponent isn't blocking anyways. So you're not gaining a lot of advantage by playing this in the early game. And in the late game, you might as well play a higher cost Gurren that has impact, since it would also have more BP to get over cards. Next is the purple 4 Holy Swords deck. So this was effectively a budget deck that found its way in Volume 1. So it could be built with basically only bulk cards, so you didn't need any SRs for this deck, so it was a fun deck if you were new to the game. Fortunately, this deck got a little bit stronger in Volume 2, so we'll be going over the new cards that were able to give it a bit of a boost. So one of the new cards is the 4-cost 1 action point Zangetsu. That is a raid card, and this raids on Toto, so this card inherently has impact, which is great. It has 4000 BP, and it says one player choose up to one 4 Holy Swords affinity card on your field. It gains 2000 BP until the end of the turn. So definitely a great card to synergize with your other smaller cards, since the whole deck is more of a rush deck. So this allows you to gain impact to close the game, and also allows you to pump one of your smaller characters to effectively deal damage or force your opponent to block. So one of the main strategies of the deck is to really pump out a lot of these 3-cost 1 action point 3500 raid cards that are not that strong individually, but allow you to gain card advantage while still putting pressure onto the board. So for example, this Gekka has impact 1 if you have the aforementioned affinities on your field, and it can't be blocked by a character of 2000 or less BP, so definitely great to push for damage at the end of the game. And we have our 3-cost 1 action point Burai Kai, which is a raid card that effectively allows you to search on the top of your deck for one of the affinity cards, and allows you to refill your hand and to allow you to gain card advantage. And also we have our new 3-cost Akatsuki. That is a raid card, and this card allows you to pick a card from your sideline when played and add it to your hand, specifically a 1/4 Holy Swords affinity or Toto card with 2 or less required energy from your sideline to your hand. So a great card to be able to refill your hand to continue to be aggressive. So this was a staple card in the Volume 1, the 4-cost Gekka, which says which for 1 action point says Raid, activate main. If on the front line once per turn, all 4 Holy Swords affinity cards on your field gain 500 BP until the end of the turn. So this is very important because as you saw, all your smaller raids only have 3500 BP, which is definitely a negative since it can't get over most of the 4000 cards on your opponent's field unless buffed by this card. And it also says when attacking once per turn, choose up to 1 4 Holy Swords affinity card on your field and switch it to active. So this card effectively allows you to double attack with your other smaller cards, which is great in an aggressive strategy. And this card has 4000 BP. So another card that allows you to turn your smaller cards into real threats is the 2-cost 1 action point Trailer. So our next deck is the green deck, which was definitely a very strong deck in Volume 1, but definitely lacked a few cards that made it not as consistent as other decks. So we'll be looking at the whole strategy of the deck and the new cards from Volume 2 that allow it to be more consistent. So to remind everybody, the main boss monster of the deck is the 8-cost 1 action point Lancelot. So this is a beast of a card since it has inherently damage 2, even when unrated, and it has 5000 BP. And it says Raid on Suzaku, impact 1. And it also says when played, choose up to 1 character with 5000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and sideline it. So definitely a great card to play when you have the energy. But you also have the smaller 6-cost 1 action point Lancelot that also has inherently damage 2, but also says Raid. When played, this character gains 1000 BP until the start of your next turn. So it goes up to 5000 from 4000. It also says when sideline, return the bottom card of this rated character to your hand. And now we'll be looking at the new card, the 2-cost 1 action point Nunnally. That is a great card in allowing this card to be a lot more consistent. So this card says if you have 4 cards on your energy line, this character gains 1 energy generation. And when played, draw a card, then place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. So even though this doesn't seem like that strong of a card, it is a very important card to allow you to get up to that 8 energy to be able to play your 8-cost Lancelot. We'll still be playing the Cornelia package, which includes the 4-cost 1 action point Cornelia Fighter. So this card says when played, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, play up to 1 green character with 2 or less required energy and 1 AP cost among them set to resting onto your field. Place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. So as you see, this card will search the 2-cost Nunnally that we just looked at, and that's why the Nunnally is a great piece to improve the consistency of the deck. And don't forget, one of the other main targets is the 2-cost Krumi. That is also a great energy generator for the deck and is also a great target for the 4-cost 1 action point Cornelia to hit. We'll be looking at a new card that we won't be including in this deck, but we'll also be explaining why. So this is a decent card on its own, is the 4-cost 1 action point Lancelot Conquista. That says Raid on Suzaku. During your turn, if you have 3 or more other Knights of the Round affinity cards on your field, this character gains 1000 BP and impact 1. And it also says activate main. If on the front line, once per turn, choose 1 other Knights of the Round affinity card on your field, it gains 1000 BP until the end of the turn. So definitely a decent card. The main problem is that we already have a lot of Lancelots and we are starving for Suzaku raid targets in this deck. So if you play too many of these Lancelots, even though they're good cards on their own, if we're using our Suzakus as raid targets for this one, we won't have enough raid targets to be able to use our stronger Lancelots later in the game. But of course, I just like to show that even though this card is not mandatory in this deck, the alt art is definitely a great card to look out for. Another new card that can combo with the 4-cost Lancelot Conquista is the new 2-cost 1 action point Suzaku. That says when attacking once per turn, choose up to 1 other character on your field with Knights of the Round affinity. It gains damage +1 until the end of the turn. So effectively, this Suzaku can give the 4-cost 1 action point Lancelot damage 2. And since it already has impact 1, that makes it a beast of a card. But it's just a little bit clunky since you might want to use this Suzaku as a raid target, so then you won't be able to use it to pump up the Lancelot that you wanted to play. So our next deck is the blue Rolo deck. So this is a very interesting deck since it features a lot of resting mechanics. This is pretty much in line with what Rolo does in the show. So our first card that we're looking at is the 4-cost 1 action point Vincent, which is the Rolo fighter. It says Raid on Rolo. When played, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. It will remain set to resting the next time it will be switched to active. So a great freeze effect. It also says activate main. If on the front line, switch to resting. Choose 1 character on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. So effectively on the turn that you play this card, you can rest 2 opposing cards. And we will see other cards that will synergize well with this resting mechanic. So to follow up with the resting mechanic, we have our 2-cost 1 action point Rolo himself. That says activate main. If on the front line, switch to resting. Choose 1 character on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. And this card has 3000 BP. So what's good about this card is that it doesn't have any BP range, so you can effectively rest even the biggest card on your opponent's field without any issue. And another card that follows the resting theme is the 3 cost 1 action point 0 that says this card is also treated as Lelouch. And it says when played, you may switch to resting 1 active Order of the Black Knight's Affinity card on your front line. If you do, your opponent switches to resting 1 active character on your front line. The ruling is that your opponent chooses which card they want to select to be rested, and this card is a color trigger with 2 energy generation, which is great for the deck, and has 3000 BP. And another important card of this deck is a 4 cost 1 action point Rolo that has a very strong 4000 BP. It has an active trigger and says when played, you may pay 1 AP. If you do, choose up to 1 character with an activate main ability, 3000 or less BP, and 1 or less energy generation on your opponent's field and sideline it. So the main aspect of this card is that it has 4000 BP, but its effect is actually pretty strong in some niche scenarios. So for example, if you're playing against a purple Code Geass deck, the 0-1 action point CC actually has an activate main effect that they most likely don't use, but it allows it to be a target for your Rolo. And for whatever reason, if your opponent is playing this card, the 2 cost 1 action point Masamichi, so most importantly, the target is actually himself if you're playing the mirror match, since the 2 cost 1 action point Rolo is also an activate main card. So we'll be looking at some of the payoffs for resting your own cards, and that would be the 3 cost 1 action point Locket. So this card says you can only use 1 Locket card per turn. It also says choose 1 Rolo or Vincent on your field and switch it to active. It gains 1000 BP until the end of the turn. If Lelouch or Shinkiro is on your field, choose up to 1 of your AP cards and switch it to active. And this card has an active trigger. So this card allows you to be aggressive still, even when you're resting your own cards. And another card is the 4 cost 1 action point special deck, which is the Geass of Absolute Suspension. This card says choose 1 of the following, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. If Rolo or Vincent is on your field, switch it to resting. It will remain set to resting. Then the next time it will be switched to active, draw a card instead. So this is a freezing effect with a draw effect, so definitely great. But you can also choose up to 1 resting character on your opponent's front line and sideline it. So definitely a very versatile card. And next we'll be looking at the 4 cost 1 action point Shinkiro. So this card raids on the Lelouch. It inherently has impact 1, and it says activate main if on the front line once per turn. If there's a resting character on your opponent's field, draw a card and give this character. Your opponent cannot choose this character with abilities on characters or triggers until the end of the turn. So definitely a very strong card that allows you to synergize well with all your resting abilities. So next we'll be looking at the blue Chinese Federation deck. So this is a bit different since it is not really depending on the resting strategies, but overall being a much more aggressive deck. So the first card that we'll be looking at is the 5 cost 1 action point Shenhu that says inherently, if on the front line at the end of your attack phase, sideline this character or place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. So this is pretty lore accurate since in the show, the main pilot, Shinkei, coughs up blood every time she fights somebody. So when you do raid it on Shinkei, this card will have impact 1. It also says when played, choose up to 1 character with 3500 or less BP on your opponent's front line and return her to their hand, allowing you to bounce a card. It also says choose up to 1 Tianzi on your energy line and switch it to active. So we're looking at why this particular line is very important. And most importantly, this card has 4500 BP. So this is very important since it's pretty much one of the first 5 cost cards to have such a high BP range. So this is a very strong card when you raid it on your opponent's turn because you can bounce a small card and also use this card to block an opposing 4000 BP card also. So one of the cards that synergizes well with this card is the 3 cost Tianzi. That is a Chinese Federation card that says during your turn, when cards are placed from your hand into your sideline by an ability on a Shinkei or Shenhu on your field, you may switch this active character to resting. If you do, add up to 1 of those cards placed into your sideline to your hand. Also when played, if on the energy line, if Shinkei or Shenhu is on your front line, switch this character to active. So this card effectively allows you to not lose card advantage when you are using the discard effects of your cards. And this card is a color trigger with 2000 BP. So other cards that will discard cards that can synergize well with the previous card that we saw is the 4 cost 1 action point Shinkei that says during your turn, if Tianzi is on your field, this character gains 500 BP, bringing it up to 4000 from 3500. It also says when played, draw 2 cards, then place 2 cards from your hand into your sideline. So notably, if you play this card in conjunction with the Tianzi, you only really lose 1 card. And another card that functions well with this discard strategy is the 1 cost 1 action point Shinkei that says when played, draw a card, then place 1 card from your hand into your sideline with 2500 BP. So with the Tianzi, you only draw a card and you don't even have to discard 1 since it comes back to your hand anyways. So why is this a more aggressive strategy than the Rolo strategy? It's basically because we have our 3 cost 2 action point when Shenhu wins glory. So this card says if you choose Shenhu while using this card, reduce this card's AP cost by 1, bringing it down to 1 AP. And it says choose one Chinese Federation affinity card on your front line. It gains 1000 BP and double attack until the end of the turn. And notably, your Shenhu inherently has impact 1, so this can definitely allow you to finish the game if needed. And a card that also functions well with the previous card is the 3-cost 1 action point Gun Ru, who is also a Chinese Federation card. So this card can be rated on any Chinese Federation card on your field, not any specific name. It says during your turn, if you have 4 or more other Chinese Federation affinity cards on your field, this character gains 1000 BP, so bring it up from 3,500 to 4,000. It also says when played, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 Chinese Federation affinity card among them, and add it to your hand. Place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. So even though on its own it's not a very strong card, it synergizes well with all the other cards in your deck, and it allows you to search for Shenhu, which is very important. And to add to that, another card that allows you to search for the Shenhu is the 2-cost 1 action point, An Everlasting Promise. Our next deck is an old deck that definitely got a lot of new cards. This is the Pizza deck from Volume 1, and I'll be looking at the main strategy of the deck and new pieces that it gained from Volume 2. So one of the core strategies of this deck from Volume 1 was playing the 4-cost 2 action point CC, which says this character gains all abilities listed below if you have the required number of Pizza affinity cards in your sideline. If you have 2 or more, play this character set to active onto your field. 4 or more, this card inherently has impact 1. 6 or more, during your turn, this character gains 1000 BP and double attack. So it effectively goes up to 5,000 from 4,000. So definitely a beast of a card if you can get all the pizza cards into your sideline. So what are the pizza cards? We'll be looking at them next. We have our 1-cost 1 action point Delivery Pizza, and this card says draw a card, then place 1 card from your hand into your sideline, choose one of your AP cards and switch it to active. And we also have our 2-cost 1 action point Giant Pizza, and it says choose one character on your field. It gains 1000 BP until the end of the turn. Choose one of your AP cards and switch it to active. So on their own, these 2 cards are not that very strong, but they allow you to feel your CC to be able to get to your full potential. And I'll be looking at the new CC card, which is the 4-cost 1 action point CC that says Raid on top of CC, and it says when played, you may place 2 cards from your hand into your sideline. If you do, draw 3 cards. It also says when sideline, if you have 3 or more Pizza affinity cards in your sideline, add up to 1 character card with 3 or less required energy other than CC from your sideline to your hand. So definitely a great utility card that allows you to connect different aspects of your deck for synergy purposes. And then as a reminder, we have our 5-cost 1 action point Lelouch that says Raid on Lelouch. When played, choose up to 1 character with 2000 less BP on your opponent's front line and sideline it. If you have 4 or more event cards in your sideline, 4000 or less BP instead. So definitely a great card to use when you want to take advantage of all the event cards that you have placed into your sideline. And this card has 4000 PP with a raid trigger. So notably, if you raid this card on your opponent's turn, without much condition, you can knock out an opposing card during their turn. And these are the cards from Volume 1 that will still be relevant in this deck. Is our 3-cost 1 action point Shirley. So this card inherently has Activate Main, switch to resting, and allows you to draw a card, then place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. And also, this card, pretty nutty if you can raid it, because it says when played, add 1 red event card from your sideline to your hand. And this has no restrictions on the event card that you can pick, so you can effectively pick, for example, the chess game, which is your special, and the ability to recycle your specials is definitely very important. And our last deck is the red Ashford Academy deck, which unfortunately remains unchanged from Volume 1. We will be explaining why. So we'll be going over key strategies of this deck and potential cards from Volume 2 that can be added. So the main strategy of the deck is to use the site, the 2-cost 1 action point Ashford Academy. And this card says play this site active onto your field, and it says activate main, switch to resting. Choose 1 character on your field with 3000 less BP and Ashford Academy affinity, play this turn and switch it to active. So this card effectively allows you to turn your small guys or girls into aggressive attackers the turn they are played. Another card that synergizes well with your small characters is the 3-cost 1 action point Nunnally. So this card says activate main, switch to resting, choose 1 other character with 3000 less BP on your field. It gains 1000 BP and impact +1 until the end of the turn. And this card has 2000 BP with an active trigger. So this card effectively allows you to buff the smaller cards that you turn active with the Academy into real threats. And those cards would likely have 4000 BP after the buff, and they will have impact 1. And we also have our 4-cost 1 action point Suzaku that says when raided, impact 1. And says when attacking, once per turn, choose up to 1 other character with 3000 less BP on your field and switch it to active. So this would allow you to double attack with cards that you switched active with Ashford Academy, or even if you don't have the Ashford Academy, it allows you to attack with smaller cards that you just played that turn. However, unfortunately, we will not be getting the 1-cost Nunnally, and this card was very important in making the deck very strong in the Japan meta. So this card says activate main once per turn. choose one of your characters, and it gains this character cannot be blocked by characters with 4,000 or higher for the turn. So this effectively says that your smaller cards that you turn active either with the Ashford Academy or your Shuzaku can't be blocked. So every turn you'll be getting at least 1 damage in, and this can definitely help you push for damage during the late game. And lastly, we'll be looking at new cards in Volume 2 that unfortunately will not make the cut for specific reasons. So for example, this 0 cost 1 action point Geno says when played, look at the top card of your deck and place it on the top of your deck or into your sideline, and this card has 2000 BP. So this strategy works decent if you want cards into your sideline, but the aggressive Ashford Academy doesn't really care for that, and it has no trigger, so I think Arthur is actually a better card since that card has Nullify Impact, which is relevant in the late game. And there's also a new 4 cost 1 action point Geno that says when played, choose up to 1 other character with 3,000 or less BP on your front line and switch it to active, and this card has 4,000 BP. The fact that this card has 4,000 BP prevents it from being turned active by the Ashford Academy, which makes it a bit anti-synergy, and also because you don't really need its main effect, since by playing 4 Ashford Academies, you'll definitely have options to be able to turn your smaller cards active. Alright, thanks for watching, and like and subscribe for more videos.